Hi, everyone. I'm Faye Rosenfeld, and I am the Vice President of Public Programs here at the New York Public Library. It is my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's very special Live from the NYPL, our first live event of 2019. We are so honored to have Jason Rezaian here with us this evening to talk about his new memoir, Prisoner, an account of his life as an American journalist in Iran, his arrest on false charges of espionage, and his 544-day ordeal in an Iranian prison. I know many people here this evening and around the world follow Jason's imprisonment with great concern and alarm, in particular his fellow journalists who really helped galvanize world attention around his plight. So we are especially thrilled that one of our greatest journalists, the longtime editor of The New Yorker and an esteemed trustee of the New York Public Library, David Remnick, is joining Jason in conversation this evening. There really couldn't be a better place for these two distinguished journalists to be having this conversation than right here at the New York Public Library. Like the Free Press, the Public Library is an institution that stands on the front lines of democracy. We ensure that everyone has access to books, information, and ideas, to all the essential knowledge that fuels human curiosity and creativity, helps build strong and healthy communities, and fosters an informed citizenry that is capable of distinguishing fact from fiction and fully engaging in civic life. And I just want to acknowledge that the president of the New York Public Library is with us this evening, Tony Marks. Programs like tonight's are an important way that we carry out that mission, so it's really gratifying to see so many people here. And of course, we hope that you will come back for more. Our guests at Live later this spring will include, among others, Henry Louis Gates Jr. speaking about his new book, Stony the Road, Emily Bazelon, who will be joined by Stacey Abrams for a deep dive into the criminal justice system, the novelist Rachel Cusk, the poet and library lion Claudia Rankine, the former Secretary of Homeland Security Janet Napolitano, and many more. Tickets for our full spring season of Live will go on sale on February 28th, so please mark your calendars and stay tuned. And let me just say, even before our full spring season of Live gets underway later this spring, we hope you'll join us for some of our many free public programs. For those of you who are interested in more about Iran, I hope you come back on February 4th to hear Rabia Ghaffari speak about her debut novel, To Keep the Sun Alive, which is set in 1970s Iran. Later that week, the essayist and novelist Marilyn Robinson will be here for 2 consecutive nights to deliver the Joanna Jackson Goldman Memorial Lectures on American Civilization and Government, sponsored by our Coleman Center for Scholars and Writers. And on February 15th, we'll celebrate the opening of our new exhibition, Love and Resistance, Stonewall 50, at our popular library after-hours event with a building-wide evening of activities with talks and music, dancing, all honoring the continued struggle for LGBTQ human rights that began with Stonewall. And we have so much more that we're excited about this season. Paul Muldoon, Uta Lemper, and Eileen Miles reading the poetry of Bertolt Brecht, an evening of speculative fiction with Victor Laval and N.K. Jemisin. We have Ta-Nehisi Coates, Aaron Lee Carson, George Packer, Barry Lopez, much, much, much more. So I do hope you'll come back and join us. All our programs are made possible by the generosity of Celeste Manaz and Adam Bartos, as well as all of you, our library patrons and supporters. So once again, I want to thank you all for being here tonight and for being part of our wonderful community. One program note, we're asking that there be no photography tonight, please. Jason will be signing books immediately after the program. All book purchases here benefit the New York Public Library, so please stick around, buy a book, get it signed, and enjoy. And now, please join me in welcoming David Remnick and Jason Rezaian.
They like you.
It's pretty cool. Thanks for coming.
I just want to say before we begin, and I normally don't before an event like this, but I've been lucky enough to have this book in galley form for, I guess, a few months. And it's absolutely terrific. and you will do yourself an enormous favor, and I get no kickbacks whatsoever to, in some form or another, buy and read this book. Your life will be enriched in the same way that only the most penetrating books about the theme of human rights, human resilience, and wit can provide. I think that what's so surprising about this book is at times it's not only a very moving book and a description of a world that we all hope not to have to visit personally, to be quite frank, but it's also very funny at the right times.
Good.
At the right times. Jason, I thought we'd begin by talking about your family. Your father, who sadly is no longer with us, came to this country, came to the United States when? Tell me about the Iranian background of your family.
So my dad was from a pretty big city in Iran, the second biggest city, which is called Mashhad, in the northeast corner of the country, very close to the border with Afghanistan. And he came from a very large family. He had 6 sisters and 2 brothers. And as fate would have it, he was the middle brother, which meant that he was destined to be in the shadows of his big brother. And my dad was never a shadows type of guy. And he looked to the West and thought to himself, you know what, I'd like to go to America. And at that time, in 1959, when he moved to Washington, D.C. to go to school.
Which was an easy thing to do in 1959?
It was becoming an easier thing. I mean, the relationship between Iran and the United States was very different at that time. The Shah sponsored a lot of students' ability to come to the States to study. And a lot of those people would come to the United States for years on end and then return to Iran to implement what they learned in the U.S. in their lives in Iran. And at a certain point in the mid-'60s, right up until when the revolution happened in 1979, there were more students from Iran coming to study in America than in any other country. So it was a time when it was pretty normal for Iranians to come, but when he came, he was at that first wave. So he landed in Washington, D.C., hated it right off the bat.
Had English? Had good English at the
He
time?
had almost no English when he first arrived.
That might have been a factor.
Yeah, I think so. And he sent a letter back to my grandfather in Iran and said, Dad, I hate it here. Mom was right. I should have stayed. I'm coming home. Sent off the letter, and I wasn't alive at that time, obviously, but I gather that it took many weeks for him to get a response. And when he did, my grandfather said, no, you're not. You're staying there. I put all this money together. I used all of these resources that I had for you to go and study on the other side of the world. And you're going to study. And you're going to get your education. And at the end, if you want to come back here, we'll be waiting for you. And that was the beginning of his life in America.
And the family was middle class or merchant
upper middle class. I mean,
yeah.
they were doing well. And, you know, they were a prominent family in that city, which was, you know, the religious center of Iran.
What did they do for a living?
My grandfather was a stakeholder in several factories, also in a turquoise mine, which was a big business in that part of the world. And later on, the Persian rug trade, which is what my dad ended up specializing in throughout his life. And as those of you who are the children of immigrant entrepreneurs know, if your father was in a business, you end up in that business. So, you know, I had a time in the trade, and I'm looking at this nice rug.
What do you think?
It's all right.
It's okay. We could do better. We could
Special prize for you, my friend. Yeah.
How much you think this rug would go for on the open market?
On the open market?
Yeah.
Not for sale, exactly.
Tony Marks says it's not for sale. Tony Marks is lying. Everything for sale.
Every rug has a price.
You can sell a painting. You can sell a rug, my friend. Okay. How did your father come to stay in the States, and why?
So when he finished school, ultimately he ended up transferring to school out in California and moved to San Francisco and went to San Francisco State, which is where he met my mom. My mom is from Illinois. And she tells a great story that they saw each other in the library several times, and he was looking at her, and keeps looking at her, and she's looking back, and finally he says, "Coffee." And
this is pre-Me Too.
Yeah. Coffee. And she says, "Are you asking me or are you telling me?" And that started their courtship, and they were married until he passed away in 2011.
Now, you grew up in Northern California, in Marin County?
Marin County.
And what was your Iranian life and Iranian life, and what was your American life? How did that coexist? What was your consciousness of that background, in terms of language, in terms of culture, and eventually in terms of politics?
I mean, it was quite fluid. It was what was normal to me. My mother was an only child, and my dad had this massive family. Of his 6 sisters, 3 of them moved to Marin before the revolution in 1979, and his younger brother and his family also moved to Marin. So we had this massive family, cousins and aunts and uncles that we spent a lot of time with. And so it seemed really normal to us. I was 3 years old when the revolution happened and the hostages were taken. And my earliest memories of Iranians and Iran as a subject or an idea was the juxtaposition of these people that I knew with what I was seeing on television.
How do you mean?
The flag burning, the hostages, the women shrouded in black, the screaming of "Death to America," all this sort of thing. My relatives were not anything like that. And they were almost talking to the television screen, saying, "That's not us. That's not who we are."
What did they make of the revolution?
I think, like most Iranians living in America at that time, the younger ones thought that this was a major current, that things were going to change, and older ones sort of thought it was a passing fad. We have a friend who talks about his cousin, two-horned cousin. Why do you call him two-horned cousin? Because he's always walking around doing like this. 2 months. The mullahs are going to be gone in 2 months. And he's been saying that since 1979.
Right. Sooner or later, he'll be right.
Exactly.
But not quite yet.
Not yet.
Yeah. And so you're obviously not coming into political consciousness at age 3.
No, sir.
What about language
So I didn't grow up speaking Farsi, but I think as some people learn as they grow up and sort of go back to their roots a little bit, a lot of things were ingrained in my subconscious.
So you learned it academically?
I learned it, very much on the street level in Iran.
So you never had, the Washington Post didn't send you to Middlebury,
no,
nothing
sir.
like that?
No, it wasn't like that. No, I learned on the...
I'm older than you, so
they used to
the Washington Post sent me to Middlebury to learn Russian.
Wow.
They should have saved their money, but so you had you were hearing it passively and not understanding it. It was
That's
that
right.
thing that some of your relatives spoke.
Exactly.
What were you inhaling? What part of you, before you ever went there, was culturally attuned to Iran the way it wouldn't be for me?
I mean, I think first and foremost, give me a good look. The food, right? I was a good eater from an early age. And I never discriminated on Iranian food. I always enjoyed it.
What's your favorite?
There's a dish called Ghormeh Sabzi, which anybody know it out there?
Clearly, some people do. Yeah, he obviously makes it. So what is
that's going to get more applause than anything else tonight. That's pretty cool. Ghormeh Sabzi.
What is it?
It's a stew of leafy greens, parsley and tarragon and fenugreek. And dried lemons, kidney beans, and if you're doing it right, lamb shank.
Sounds pretty good.
It's great.
I'm hungry already.
Come on over, Yegi will make us a big pot.
That I can believe. Now, at what point did you decide I want to be, foolishly enough,
right,
be a journalist?
That happened when I was about 20 years old. I was in school.
You didn't want to be in the rug business?
No, and I had spent enough time in a rug shop to realize that that wasn't for me. But I studied creative writing. I graduated from the New School right around the corner, and made my first trip to Iran in 2001, and I knew that if I was able to get myself there, that I would be able to write from there. I didn't think it would take me, 10 years to really build up the muscles and the ability to make a go at it.
What were your impressions of Iran when you first went there? Were you embraced by family? Was there a family there to take you in?
My dad still had 3 sisters living there. They're all still there. So we spent a lot of time with them, and I traveled around the country. And I was enthralled from that first visit in 2001.
But if we watched a lot of television, not all of it, but some of it, and if we read some of the coverage, not all of it, but some of it, Iran is a scary place.
No.
It's a daunting place.
No,
it's a place where it's us versus them, and then we're told that the people love us, but the regime doesn't, What's it really like?
So it's one of the more... I'm a person who's been fortunate to travel to several dozen countries. And I think since going to Iran for the first time, I've probably only seen 5 or 6 new places after that. It was so fascinating to me from that first breath in 2001 that I just wanted to go back and learn more and unravel the place. I think any place is, your perceptions of it are dominated by the people that you meet there. And they have this sense of their own identity dating back so long. It's ingrained in their language, in their food, in their soul, in everything that they do. And oftentimes, and we see it more and more played out now, it's at odds with not only the images that we have of that country, but the leadership of that country. So it's this tension. There's a real tension that you can feel at all times that's really seductive.
So how did you maneuver your way, journalistically and in terms of your career, to get to go to Iran for the Washington Post? My recollection is most major newspapers, most news outlets, in a world of shrinking, these institutions are shrinking, but also in foreign coverage is shrinking faster than the rest of it. Tehran was not a place that normally had a bureau, even in the best of circumstances. How did this all happen?
I did it. I was going to say that I did it the old-fashioned way, but I didn't do it the old-fashioned way. I moved there without any job or any kind of clear sense of who I would be writing for.
You just lifted stakes, quit your job. Where were you before?
So I said that I spent plenty of time in a rug shop. I didn't learn my lesson. I opened my own rug shop.
Good move.
I see some people here tonight that have been in that rug shop before in San Francisco. I had it for about a year exactly. I opened the doors, if you can believe it, in May of 2008. And by October of 2008, I thought to myself, I may never sell another rug because nobody's got any money in their pockets anymore. This is a bad
So it's right in the midst of the financial crisis.
Right in the middle of that.
And your move was to get on an airplane
and go to Tehran.
Seemed
like the
what
smartest
better
thing to do.
reaction to the financial crisis could there have been?
Here we are now,
So, and you had, a few dollars in your pocket. You show up in Tehran, and how do you make a life for yourself?
So I had freelanced. I'd written freelance articles over the years. When I had visited Iran, I had a small body of work at that point, and this was at the time of the re-election campaign of Ahmadinejad in 2009. Nobody was really predicting what a huge story that would evolve into. I was there on the ground, filing for a couple of very small outlets, and one of my pieces that I wrote on the eve of that election got picked up by the Times. And I was never out of work again after that.
Now, why is it that at that point, the New York Times, the Washington Post do not have bureaus in a place that you would think is every bit as of interest to an American reader as certainly Cairo or Jerusalem or...
So the Post actually did have a bureau at that point, but there were very few other bureaus. And the reason was, and we talk about...
Thomas
Erdberg, yeah.
Who's been there for a long time.
Yeah. When we talk about bureaus, these are apartments, right? A single person usually doing the job. It's not the image that you have of a big staff and translators and all of that. The problem is that Iran makes it very difficult for people to report.
Well, how do they make it more difficult than, say, Moscow or Beijing?
They let far fewer journalists in the first place.
They don't want the coverage.
I think over the last few years, at certain points, they've wanted more coverage. That's slowed since I was detained, but it was hard to get in. I mean, they have a very long vetting process, and you have to get all sorts of letters from publishers and editors. And I think a lot of editors want to have a presence in Iran, but realize that there might be more hassle than it's worth.
So the Washington Post, you figured this out bureaucratically, right?
So I'd been working as a freelancer in Iran for 3 years when the Post reached out to me and said, we need a new guy.
You're the guy.
Yeah.
You're the guy. Now, were you alone at this point, or had you done the smartest thing you've ever done in your life and meet your wife?
We had met, but we hadn't married yet. I think we married almost a year to the day after I got the job with the Post.
Now, when I was in Moscow in the late 80s, and this is already a fairly liberal time, it was really a thing if a correspondent had a relationship with a Russian. It was a thing, because the worry was, what if she or he is
compromised
and going to compromise you, and all this kind of thing. Is that something that ran through your mind? You met Yegi, you had started a relationship, and you were working together?
We grew into a working relationship.
Right. That's what marriage is all about.
Yeah, I mean, we're learning.
Yeah.
We had been together for about 6 or 8 months, and she studied English, had a master's degree in English translation, was working in a company like so many young, smart Iranians were, not getting paid enough, and no real future. And I said, why don't you give journalism a crack? It's not the best job in America, but here, if you're somebody that's speaking English, and have the ability to, put sentences together and all of that, you could probably work for some foreign media. And that's how she got started, and ultimately she became Bloomberg's correspondent in Tehran.
So how many foreign correspondents were there in Tehran when we're coming up on, on the date that we're coming up on, meaning 2014? How many accredited, substantial, working journalists from the United States are in Tehran?
From the United States, just me.
You made it kind of easy for them, didn't you?
Yeah, apparently, yeah. For U.S. publications, 3 of us at the time. For the wires, all of the wire services had small staffs there, but a total of probably 10 people reporting in English from Iran.
So in the late spring of 2014, something very fun and pleasant happened to you. You were invited by, or met, Anthony Bourdain, who came to a friend of mine, and was by then a huge star on television on CNN, and he came to Tehran, and tell the story, he dropped in on you, and suddenly you were the guy that showed him around.
Yeah,
you both were the people that
I'd corresponded with producers from the show years before. We were in touch for about 1.5 years when Tony was still doing shows for the Travel Channel. And he was really interested. I never connected with him directly, but the producers were very adamant about the fact that they wanted to come for a lot of reasons that had to do with insurance and visas and all that sort of thing. It couldn't happen. But when he moved over to CNN, it became a possibility. Flash forward all those years later, after having these conversations with them back in 2007 and 2008, I get an email from a friend of mine, an Iranian American who was in Los Angeles at the time, and he said, a producer from Bourdain's show reached out to me, and they're coming to town in a couple of days, and they want to know where they should eat. And I told them to get in touch with you. And so, we started a conversation. And literally, I think it was the last day they were in town, they called up and said, would Yegi and you like to come and shoot a segment for the show? And the rest is really history.
Well, tell us about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll never forget. It was, if you've seen that episode of the show, there's a scene where there's kind of this massive dust storm and, you know, the sky turns green. It's the sort of thing that I've never seen in my life before or since. And they captured that on film. The next afternoon, we're invited to this lunch in this very serene part of Tehran up in the mountains. There's rivers going by. Yegi and I make the trek up there. And we sit down in this restaurant, and I'm looking around, and it's got by far the best view of any of the restaurants up there.
This is a place that you picked?
No. You know, they picked it because of the view. And I realized, you know, oftentimes the places with the best views have the worst food.
Mm-hmm. It's almost a rule.
It's a rule, right? My wife is here; she's a witness to this. I went to the to the waiter before the production crew showed up, and I said, "Can you get the manager of the restaurant?" And he came out, and I explained to him. I said, "The most important person in, you know, the history of food television is about to come to your restaurant to have a meal.
No pressure.
And if you don't think you're up to it." 3 doors down, there's another restaurant that has very good food, and I will pay for you to bring their food instead. They didn't like that.
Imagine that.
So, you know, Tony shows up, we start shooting the scene. You know, the manager assures me, no, we've got the best food. You know, the platters of kebab come out, you know, covered in cellophane. They'd obviously just come out of the microwave, and I thought to myself, oh my God. But he was so gracious about it, and we had really an incredible conversation that lasted a couple hours. He left the country, and that was the last we saw of him until, you know, after this whole thing happened.
Yeah. So before we get to the obvious, I want to paint the picture of what it is to be a correspondent in Tehran as opposed to, say, Paris.
Right.
Is your apartment bugged? Is that an understanding that you just operate under?
You assume that your apartment is probably bugged. You assume that most of your phone calls are being listened to. What I didn't assume at the time, and I think it only became clear right at the end, that your emails are being monitored, that your social media messaging services are all being monitored. But you're followed sometimes.
Followed in a way that you understood?
Sometimes.
Followed in order to be seen. You know, there was I got followed in Moscow, but I always got the impression that they wanted me to see them following.
Yeah.
They didn't give a damn where I was going. They just want to make me a little nervous.
From time to time, and
Right.
definitely right at the end. Yeah.
Right. What was going on in the summer of 2014 that was in any way politically unusual?
The nuclear negotiations between Iran and world powers. They were in full swing, and I was, for the first time, given the opportunity to cover the Iran story from multiple places.
Within Iran?
No. I was asked to go and cover a round of nuclear negotiations in Vienna.
In Vienna.
In Vienna. So, you know, literally a couple of days before we were arrested, I was in Vienna reporting.
But I would think that if with nuclear negotiations going on, extremely sensitive,
Right.
And optimism running
hot, yeah,
that the last thing that Tehran would want to do would be to jeopardize that in any way. Were you known to have politics that in any way made them upset?
I don't think so. I mean, I was doing my job.
Did you have a point of view that somehow was unusual or upset Tehran that you knew of?
I don't think it had anything to do with that. Literally, the day that we were arrested, I went to the press ministry. It's, you know, they call it the Ministry of Islamic Guidance and Culture, and they have different offices, sort of an Orwellian, Islamic Orwellian name, right? So I went there to pick up press credentials, our press passes, which had been extended for an entire year.
Which is a sign that you're
everything's
okay.
fine. Everything's fine. Yeah. So you know, there was no sense that I had any sort of mark on my back.
Okay, so 22nd of July dawns, 2014. Tell us what happens.
I was out reporting on a story that I was working on. Yegi and I were preparing to come to the United States, actually. We'd been married for about...
For a summer vacation.
For a couple of months, yeah. We'd been married for 15 months. Her green card paperwork was ready, right? We were about to embark on this bicontinental life that I think a lot of people, a lot of journalists, a lot of foreign correspondents aspire to. It was right there within our reach. And I got a frantic call from her that, you know, something is amiss.
What time?
About 3:30 in the afternoon. And I hightailed it home.
Something was amiss, meaning what?
She got an email basically saying that that somebody had compromising information about us and that they were going to expose it to the world and that they were demanding money. It was odd. It was a really strange sort of out-of-the-blue occurrence. Click on this, you know, a phishing scam sort of email we learned later. I made it home and I tried to calm her. She was...
And you had never gotten anything of the like before?
No, not to my...
Nothing threatening, no visits?
No threats, never. And
never got called in by the foreign ministry?
We had been called in to, you know, I'd been called in to answer about articles that I'd written. I'd have my press credential, you know, suspended for a week or two at a time, as other correspondents would routinely have happen, as a reminder that we as a power structure are here.
Just
right?
to remind you of their presence.
Yeah. But nothing like this. We called a friend of ours because when I got home, I realized that my my Facebook and Twitter accounts had also been hacked into. The passwords were changed. I called a friend who did all of our IT stuff in our house, and he came and said, you know, your accounts have all been compromised by servers that, you know, are housed in Russia, actually. Let's do whatever we can to bring your security level back up. We're going to create new passwords.
And were you pretty vigilant about that kind of thing?
Not enough.
Yeah.
Obviously not
Evidently,
enough.
yeah.
And, you know, I thought the worst was behind us, and we were preparing. You know, it was really going to be the last social event that we did before we went to the States to go to a surprise birthday party for my mother-in-law. We were, you know, dressed up, getting ready to go. I told Yegi, you know, we're going to be fine. Don't worry about this. We'll be in America.
This is now toward the evening.
It's about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. We call a taxi to come pick us up at our high-rise apartment. Get a notification from the doorman that the car is there. We go down the elevator to go and get in the car, and the door opens, and there's a man standing there with a gun pointed right at me, in my face.
Uniform?
No, plain clothes. Gray suits, we call them in Iran, right?
Which means what?
Plain clothes security officer.
Right.
They pried their way into the elevator. It was a very frantic scene. You know, they're waving guns around. There's 3 or 4 of them. And they say, we're going back up to the apartment. Take us back upstairs. Separate Yegi and I. Ransack the apartment looking for I don't know what. We have a safe in the house. Force us to open it. You know, take all of our passports, our documents, our money, her jewelry, our marriage certificate. They're cutting open tea bags. I mean, just an incredible scene. And you know, this goes on for an hour and a half.
How are you feeling during this? How is Yegi feeling?
Confused, scared. Scared. Yeah. And you know, but in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, this is a mistake. You know, this is gonna blow over.
Had this happened to anyone else in town? Any other correspondent? Any other diplomat that you knew?
Not in a way that it happened to us, that anybody ever told us about. Yeah. I know of others who'd been harassed, who'd come home to their apartments ransacked, who came home to arrest warrants pinned to their door. But those were warnings. That meant to leave town. This was something else. And they hauled us out of our apartment after about an hour and a half, put us in the back of a van, blindfolded us, handcuffed me, and took us to prison.
And they took you to Evin prison.
They took us to Evin
For
prison.
those who don't know what that means, tell us.
So Evin prison is, considered one of the most notorious, prisons for political prisoners, probably in the world. It has multiple sections. It's a vast complex that's existed for decades, and different parts of the Iranian power structure have their own sections of the prison. So the intelligence ministry has a section, the police department, the judiciary, everybody's got their own wings. And there's wings for financial crimes, for political crimes.
Had you ever been in there before?
Never. It's not the sort of place that you're allowed to report from. And the section that we ended up in was the section that belongs to the intelligence wing of the Revolutionary Guard Corps. And it's really the only
And you knew that right away?
I did not know that until...
So they're leading both of you in blindfolded?
Blindfolded, separated. I mean, they take us to separate rooms.
And saying what to you as you're shuffling along the hallway?
Not really saying anything. Take me into a big room where there's obviously lots of people in the room, and very quickly a voice starts talking to me. You know why you're here? No, I don't know why I'm here. Because you're the chief of the CIA station in Tehran. And that's when our nightmare really began. I tried to correct that record very quickly, and it was a no-win battle.
Now, just for the record, we don't have an embassy there.
There's no embassy.
So there would be no...
There'd be no consular service. Right. The Swiss are our protecting power there, but as a citizen of both the United States and of Iran, which I am,
it's an advantage or a disadvantage?
When you get arrested, it's a big disadvantage.
Because?
Because they don't acknowledge your citizenship, meaning that you're subject to Iranian laws, and this is an Iranian internal matter. It has nothing to do with you, America, but out.
And what's running through your mind initially is what seems to be what runs through political prisoners' minds always in the beginning. This is a big mistake.
We're going to get through this. Yeah.
By tomorrow morning, everything will be fine.
It'll blow over. Somebody's going to talk some sense into these guys.
Who's on your side? In other words, if you get arrested in Moscow, I don't mean to keep returning to that, but there is an embassy down the ring road, and it's a terrible drama, and it can go horribly wrong, but there is an embassy, there are American representatives, there's that aspect of things. Who's there to speak up for Jason and Yegi?
Absolutely nobody.
Who knew?
I think...
You don't get a phone call?
No, there was no phone call. I think within several hours, obviously we didn't show up to the party that we were supposed to go to. Yegi's parents probably feared the worst. They made it to our apartment at some point, saw that the destruction of the place, and I don't know how many days it was before she was able to reach out and call them.
How long was Yegi kept in jail?
72 nights, all of them in solitary confinement.
72 nights in solitary. She was.
She was.
And you initially in
49
solitary?
nights in solitary, and then the rest of the time with two other gentlemen, two other brothers at this point.
Who were there, obviously, to watch over you?
No, it turned out that they were both long-term prisoners as well. One of them was an Iranian Kurdish businessman who is sadly still in prison, and the other was from the Republic of Azerbaijan. He and I spent 13 months together, and and he's now back home with his family.
Let me ask you this: when did the interrogations begin? One of the great extended narratives of this book is your interrogations with and relationship with a guy named Kazem. Am I pronouncing it correctly?
That's correct. Yeah.
When does he enter the picture?
I think it was about day 3, after I've been taken to solitary, and have spent a couple of days trying to figure out what's going on.
I want people to get a taste of this book, and also your description of your first encounter with your interrogator is so vividly drawn that I'd rather you read it rather than me tease it out of you secondhand. You could do a page or two, whatever you feel comfortable with.
The first time I met him, I could only hear his voice. I was blindfolded, which was the rule whenever I was not in my cell. He spoke better English than I expected anyone there would, and had a deep, breathy voice, which immediately reminded me, and always will, of Wanda, the gender-bending character Jamie Foxx played on In Living Color, which consisted primarily of him wearing a blonde wig and lipstick, who was constantly threatening to rock your world. In our initial encounter, before all the questions began, he claimed that he was chosen by the judiciary to defend me. "I am your attorney, chosen by the great judge," he said. I couldn't see him, but that was obviously a lie. "If you're my attorney, why am I blindfolded?" "It is for your protection." "What does that mean?" "The charges against you are very serious, and you must tell me everything if you want to leave this place." "What charges?" "Espionage," he said. "You are an spy." "We know that. You will leave as soon as you like. Everything is up to you." "I would like to leave now." He was not actually my lawyer, he explained, but rather my interrogator, or as he referred to himself, my expert. "You must tell me about the avocado. This is code. We know that. But for what?" If this is really about a Kickstarter project, these guys are dumber or more paranoid and have fewer real security problems than I ever thought possible. "I'm sorry for saying so, but you're making a big mistake," I told him. "No," he said, slamming something against the wall close behind my head. My shoulders tensed, and they never really loosened. "We know it, and it will be much better for you if you tell us yourself than if we discover it." From his voice, I assumed Kazem was a big guy, powerful. In time, he would go on to become the perpetual good cop in group interrogations. But that voice, it made him sound so intimidating. "We must execute you, Jason. You don't give us any choice. We prefer to let you live, but you refuse to cooperate." On the 4th day, though, in another dead-end interrogation, fear and desperation mounting, I had a flash of inspiration. Something about our initial rapport made me think he might be responsive to affection, so I gave it a shot. Actually, I said, "Right now, you're my only friend in the world." "I'm your friend?" he asked. "Really?" "Yeah." There was a long pause. I had no idea what was coming. "Take off your blindfold and turn around." I did what I was told to do, cautiously, and faced him for the first time. It was just the two of us in a sparse room. There were 2 plastic chairs and a single table against the wall I had been facing. He quickly rearranged the furniture so that we sat across from each other. "Friends must be able to sit and talk comfortably," he said, but I wasn't convinced. He was slim, wore square steel-framed glasses. His hairline was receding, and he had the 3-day stubble that is common among those who would have you believe they are believers. He was probably in his early 30s, very typical working-class Iranian. My nemesis was hardly the goon I had been imagining. The initial interrogation sessions were awkward, in part because I didn't know the rules yet. The main one being that I didn't have the right to ask any questions. a concept I would be reminded of every time I asked anything, whether it was about my case or if I could use the toilet. Despite Kazem's constant assurances that he was little more than a lowly cop doing his job, and by no means a top banana, he actually said that in English, often, I became convinced that he was indeed all-powerful, that it was he calling the shots.
Well done. Well done. Thank you. You know, whether you're reading Darkness at Noon or Jacobo Timmerman or all kinds of prison memoirs, there's a similar pattern. It's all going to be okay in the morning part of the thinking, right, and then cycles of thought of optimism, despair, suicidal ideation, as they say, all come through because time starts to play tricks on you. You have nothing to do but think. Describe that process the best you can.
I mean, time is your worst enemy when you're, especially in solitary confinement. You don't have anything to fill it with.
So solitary confinement is an 8x4 cell,
yeah,
with a hole.
Oh, you know, there was a hole behind a kind of a aluminum door. You know, a little privacy for myself.
Little discretion.
Yeah.
And something to sit on or lay on? Nothing.
No.
So you're sleeping on the floor.
I had a blanket, and lights are on 24 hours a day. There's a couple of windows high up near the ceiling. I think the ceiling was about 10 feet high. There's bars on the windows. I could see, you know, more or less if it was night or day, right? And the big door that you imagine that's, you know, very heavy and makes a lot of noise, that doesn't open as often as you'd like, has two holes in it. One at face level where they can march, you know, they can make orders at you, and one down by the ground where they put food in.
And you're getting fed how many times a day?
I was getting fed very sparsely. They told me that that the great judge had decided I needed to lose some weight, and it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what is interrupting your days? Is anybody?
Interrogation.
How often?
In those first weeks, it was, you know, multiple times a day, 2-3 times a day. I can remember.
Was it threatening? Was it farcical?
At times. It was all of the above. I mean, you know, one day it was, if you don't tell us this right now, we're cutting off your right hand. And then if you don't tell us that, we're going to cut off your left hand. You're never going to see your wife again. You don't want to know what we might do to your wife. You know, you need to be executed by beheading because you're a traitor. I said to myself,
are they presenting evidence in front of you?
They're presenting printouts of my emails and, you know, some of the most innocuous things that you can imagine. There's a line in the book where they present an email where I apologized to a friend of mine for going radio silent for a couple of days. And, you know, he came back and said, this is a spy language.
Language.
Only a spies talk like this.
Jason, you made reference to an avocado in what you read. I don't think unfortunately, these folks haven't had a chance to read your book, and they will.
Please do.
Explain the avocado reference, please.
So I had put together a Kickstarter project, you know, the crowdfunding platform, several years earlier, with the intended purpose of trying to figure out why there's no avocados in Iran and hopefully starting a very small avocado farm. You can grow anything in Iran, literally. Literally, you know, you can grow whatever you want. And this was one blind spot in their agricultural industry. And I wanted to know if it had anything to do with sanctions or, you know, Great Satan stuff or whatever.
And your interrogators came to see this as a code word, avocado?
This was a code for something so nefarious that they couldn't figure it out. And, you know, as time went on, they kind of throttled it back a little bit. But anytime they would be pressing about another line of questioning, they would say, we gave you an easy time on the avocado thing, so you're going to have to make up for it on this one, for the radio silence, for example, you know?
when at a certain point they have not cut your hand off.
No.
They've not killed you. You have ailments as a result of the cold and the heat and you're not feeling all that great for sure. But at a certain point, did the psychology change into a better place? In other words, maybe they're just keeping me in here for a political reason.
I think.
And if they were going to kill me, they would have killed me already.
Once I came out of solitary, that wall of deception and misinformation really started to crumble.
Did your relationship with your interrogator change?
I mean, it evolved so many different times. And, you know, I think later in the process, I felt like I had the upper hand sometimes.
Toward what end?
Well, I mean, I think as time went on and I realized that there was a big push out in the world to bring me home, that I had value.
How did you know that?
I knew it first and foremost in my visits with Yegi when she was able to come and after she'd been released and could tell me, give me reports about things that were happening.
Were those meetings with Yegi monitored? How long
100%.
Were they?
Yeah, I mean, you know, in the beginning it was just a few minutes, very rarely, but over time they became, and thanks to her diligence in going to the court and demanding her own rights as the spouse, you know, they became institutionalized. So we'd see each other once a week, and there would be...
For how long?
An hour.
So a lot of information could pass between you. Were there things that Yegi did not tell you or figured it was best not to tell you because it would be dangerous?
Yeah. No, she told me everything, but in coded ways. Yeah, I mean,
So she'd say, you know, John Kerry said this, or President Obama said this.
We had code names for different people.
What were the code names for those people?
John Kerry was Uncle John. Javad Zarif, the foreign minister of Iran, was Jay-Z. Makes sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's that? Yeah. There was, you know, there's the head of the Iranian Human Rights Commission, if there is such a thing, right? Is a guy named Mohammad Javad Larijani, and his brother
He's been around.
You know, he speaks English. One of his brothers ran the judiciary for a long time. The other one's a Speaker of Parliament, and this one runs the High Commission on Human Rights. And he had studied at Berkeley, so we called him that dirty hippie. Sorry, Berkeley grads. I'm from that part of the world, but you know, we had to stick with our codes.
What understanding did you come to have of why yourself was sitting in Evin prison now for well in excess of a year?
I think it was we got closer to the culmination of the nuclear negotiations. It became really apparent that my fate was tied up with those negotiations, and that the people that were holding me really didn't want to see the negotiations succeed.
So this was the so-called conservatives.
I mean, I wouldn't call them that. I mean, they're the groups that want to be, you know, engaged with the rest of the world politically and economically, and there's those that don't. And those that don't had me.
Well, explain that. In other words, how do those that don't have the power to keep an American high-level prisoner,
right,
when those who want to be more engaged with the world are in power?
So
how does power work in Iran so that Jason is there in excess of 500 odd days?
I think it's really complicated. Obviously, there's a supreme leader at the top, so it's almost as though, you know, you have a system where there's elections and, you know, a Congress and Donald Trump and all that, and then the Pope gets to decide on everything at the end, right? That's sort of the way it is there. But the IRGC, which is, you know, closely aligned with the Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is closely aligned with the supreme leader, is, you know, the side of the system that wants to keep it shut off from the world. So I think initially my arrest was an internal power play, right? Let's do what we can to kind of cut the legs out from under Rouhani and his team, who are in the midst of these negotiations.
Rouhani, the
president,
the president, and who is considered a quote unquote liberal in this sphere.
And, you know, true to form, he and his team didn't play ball with that. They weren't going to get behind releasing me, and I think they paid a price for it because it became a subject of the negotiations.
And the press was relentless in covering it.
Relentless. The Post was incredible. Everybody else at other news organizations, followed suit. My family was
tireless.
Tireless. My brother did hundreds of interviews and media hits, and I was telling Yegi at every chance I got, tell anybody that that knows me to write or say whatever they want.
Did you worry about getting forgotten?
100%. I mean, it's still the thing. When I have nightmares, it's nightmares about I was supposed to be released and I didn't get released. It's a recurring theme in my life.
You have them to this day.
Not as often as I did a year or two ago, but from time to time.
Let me ask you this: at a certain point, there's a trial. Why? And what purpose does the trial serve, and how did it go?
So I think you have to ask different people how it went. I thought it went pretty good. I held my own, and they took me to trial. Oftentimes, what happens in these trials in Iran is that they bring a foreign person to court and compel them to plead guilty and promise that they'll be released within a matter of days. And that's happened like that sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't happen like that. And I had, a force behind me and my wife who said, you know what, you're probably going to come home someday, and you're not going to come home as the guy that pled guilty in the Revolutionary Court. You're going to stand tall, and you didn't do anything wrong. We didn't do anything wrong.
Did you consider pleading guilty?
I thought about it a lot. They were in my ear telling me it was the right thing to do and that it would end this whole ordeal. And I didn't have any really good options.
Could Yegi bring you books? Were there books to read?
There were. I owe you a piece about that.
You're damn right you do.
We've been talking about this for 3 years.
Tell me about some of the things you read and what gave you strength or solace or something that you could learn from.
I mean, I think that without killing our peace.
No, we were among friends.
One of the things that I learned pretty quickly was, she brought me all these books that were sort of like feel-good books, Paulo Coelho and Power of Now and all this sort of stuff, because she wanted to boost my spirits, and I think that was the right thought, but it wasn't working. What I wanted were books about injustice and torment and this sort of thing. So
you wanted books about torment while you were in prison?
100%.
Why?
Because I knew that I was a very minor character in a real long continuum of this kind of political repression that's existed for centuries.
So what were some of the books that were in that mode that
I think
you found
two
valuable?
That stick out the most as the most valuable, Animal Farm, because people talk about Iran as very Orwellian. Iran is Orwellian in the Animal Farm sense, not in the 1984 sense. And Gulag Archipelago. I mean, the judge in my trial is...
I don't mean to make light of this, but the idea of reading Gulag Archipelago in a political prison with 2 little windows in the top, I'm not joking around. That is not necessarily intuitive.
So you read it, and when you're sitting there, having experienced this sort of situation.
Unless you figured that, like Solzhenitsyn, you would then win the Nobel Prize and
I didn't think I was winning the Nobel Prize. No, but you would look at these characters and say, I know that guy.
Yeah. And that gave you some strength.
Yeah.
So. We don't have, unfortunately, we don't have all night. People have to go home and eat food that's not as good as the one you described, but they'll eat at some point. But when you look back at this experience, you were released, you celebrated, Jeff Bezos comes and takes you home. That must
Uncle Jeff, we call him Uncle Jeff.
That must be nice.
We do.
Do you get free books from now on, or no? Really, not even Amazon Extra or Plus or anything? Okay. How do you make sense of this? In the same way that people in their lives, something happens in their lives, God forbid they lose a child, or something horrible enters their lives, and they ask this question, the question being, why me? And they try to make sense of what seems to be utterly, what you described for the last hour, is senseless in so many ways. How do you understand it politically, and how do you understand it in your own life?
I mean, I think politically, I got stuck in the middle of this geopolitical hurricane. That's what landed me in prison, and when the dust settled, that's when I got out, right? So there's that. But the ensuing year and a half that was stolen from me, it's a pretty hard thing to reconcile.
Are you angry about it?
I am, but I've decided that doesn't really, as a person, I mean, some people are fueled by their anger, right, or fueled by their passions.
This is not an angry book.
I'm not an angry person. So it's not that I've tried to suppress that. I've just tried to be really honest about it. I mean, I tell stories for a living, and I figured the best thing I can do here is turn this crappy thing that happened to me into a story that I hope has meaning for the people that read it. And it's had meaning for me to write it in the sense that, people ask me if it was cathartic. No, it's not cathartic to relive a year and a half in prison. What it is it's a special element of our work, our craft, that sometimes you process a series of events that happen to somebody and turn it into a narrative, turn it into a story, draw a meaning out of it. In this case, I got to do that with something that happened to me. And so now it's, I hope more than anything, a story that I can tell and that will mean something to me and other people. And that's how I sort of accept the fact that this happened to us.
Something strange happened to you in addition to this. You went into jail, you went into Evin prison, and Barack Obama was president.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've noticed, he's not anymore. We have an Iran policy and we have an Iran obsession now.
Yeah.
It seemed very much part of the Obama presidency was trying to juggle the Saudi imperative and the Iranian imperative. That Obama, more than any president before him, saw the Saudis a lot clearer. Not that he was saying that all was well in Tehran, but he would never quite put it in these terms, but he was trying to find a balance of power between these two.
100%.
Something else has happened since, that the Trump administration is infinitely tougher on Iran. I'm not making any excuses for Iran, but Khashoggi is murdered in Turkey, and the President of the United States doesn't seem to find this particularly horrible. What has happened, and how do you assess the Trump administration's treatment of Tehran?
Look, I think you hit the nail on the head. The Saudi imperative is the problem that's staring us in the face right now that we're not doing anything about. I think that they've put all of their attention on focusing on trying to destroy the Iran threat. How they plan to do that, I don't see any clear signs of. And I think that one thing that I've thought about a lot recently is, okay, this is a very different administration than the Obama administration, but at a minimum, use the collected works and information that the Obama folks were able to glean about Iranians, because their period of dialogue and negotiation with them was really the only contact we've had with them for in the last 30 years, right? 39 years almost. And I think that they've basically thrown all of those notes in the fire and are shooting from the hip. And when I hear these guys talking about Iran, I realize, okay, they have a deep desire to overthrow the regime in Iran, but they have no idea what the heck they're talking about.
What do you think is the destiny of the regime in Iran, independent of the United States?
I mean, I think theocracy's destiny was figured out a long time ago. It doesn't really have a place in the future of our world. And I think that the Iranian
Is it a popular regime?
No.
How can you assess that? How do we know?
It's difficult to assess, you know, other than the fact that there are, you know, tens of thousands of people that have routinely protested it, and increasingly so over the last 20 years. You know, if you look at the activity of Iranians online, you know, on social media, on Instagram, Twitter, all of these places, you know, they make themselves known. And they are making it clear that they don't want to be guided by, you know, ancient Islamic principles anymore. They want to be a country that's part of the modern world just like anybody else. At the same time, they don't want to be banned from coming to America, right? They want nothing more than to engage with us in terms of their ability to travel here, their ability to study here, do business here. So I think our policy, on the one hand, is supposedly anti-Iranian regime, but ultimately stifling the Iranian people even more than they're already stifled, which doesn't seem very right-headed to me.
You live in Washington now.
I do.
And you have a new life. What were the first months, the first year like in freedom? After the initial euphoria?
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. I mean, I think you don't know what it's like unless you've had choice stolen from you. You don't know how much a burden it can be in those initial days.
You mean an example?
I mean, everything is so confusing. Do I go left? Do I go right? Do I want to eat this? Do I want to eat that? This person wants me to, you know, attend an event. Can I say no to people? What's okay, right? And I think I was wise in retrospect to take a big step back and not commit to much.
People might speak too casually of the phenomenon known as post-traumatic stress.
Yeah.
Did you suffer from it?
You know, I don't. You know, I don't like terms.
Right.
But I have a lot of symptoms that I never had before. And when I talk to people, talk to professionals, they say, "Well, that's, you know, a product of your trauma." I mean, the nightmares that I talk about, but also, you know, the confusion in busy places, the kind of sensitivity to light and sound that I never had before, irritability. You know, people. I think there's a few people out there that know me from, you know, my youth. I've never been an irritable person before. Maybe that's just getting a little bit older.
But does it? Stay tuned for news, my friend.
Yeah, we're all post-traumatic stressors here.
Does it recede with time?
A lot of it does, but I think I'm becoming more and more aware that there are workings of my brain that probably won't go back to what they were before all this, and I'm getting more comfortable with that.
Jason, you've written a book, and a wonderful book, and now it's done. And now it's out in the world, and it'll do what it does, what books do, and people will read it, and they'll read it 25 years from now and 50 years from now. But that part is done. What do you want to see your life be now that this chapter, in some ways, is closed?
I want for Yegi and me to continue working, continue writing. But to be known for the things that we do moving forward and not for the things that were done to us.
Fair enough. Jason, thank you so much.
Thank you.